Patrick.
Hey, Michael J.
Modern. What do you think?
Yes. And how?
Yeah.
So the Modern format is alive and well, thriving, and not only is there an incredible diversity of decks this past week, it's not even the same incredible... it's one thing for there to be 32 different archetypes in day 2 of an open, but when it's not even the same 32, when it's like 45 over the course of 2 weeks, and despite Storm being a defining deck of the format...
It's good. It's good, man.
And, actually, let's just start with this Storm strategy that won the Open a week ago, and, yeah.
Absolutely, we should talk about the Storm strategy, but just pause for a second. When we talk about the Modern format, I'm not even sure it's one format. Like, you're talking about 32 different decks in a day 2. I feel like
it's more color. Got
this bizarro perpendicular to standard format, and then it's like this bizarro other perpendicular to standard format. Like, it's not just one thing even. I don't know.
Okay, your feelings are valid.
Totally different complexions week over week. All right. Storm from last week.
Well, Storm is one of the things we've been seeing, and obviously the printing of Opt, a big deal. But what's interesting is that the innovation from this past week, Scott Simmons, I mean, it's not too crazy. I mean, just 2 Opts, but not 4. Got to make room for that Noxious Revival and the 18th land.
So that's actually what I was kind of getting at in terms of like bizarro perpendicular to standard. It's weird to me that Opt is like not good enough to be played in standard, but it is heavily played in a bunch of different decks in Modern. Like that's crazy, right?
No, it's not. It's really not, because cards' power level in powered format scales inversely proportionate to the casting cost. Because the value of how much every card, its ability to help you win the game, you can look at it as a function of how much ability to win the game is this, influence over the outcome of this game is it giving you in exchange for all of the costs, all of the resources, which is mana, the card, life, whatever it is. And the larger the card pool that you're drawing on, the more compressed the format becomes, the more you get per mana. And in a format where every card is so undercosted, where Tarmogoyf is just a normal card,
just a guy,
then what it means for a card to cost 2 is something different. Because any card that costs 2, well, it could have been a Tarmogoyf, right? Like, to compare take for instance Obnixilis. Obnixilis, all-star in standard, staple throughout, not necessarily format defining, but a top-tier card.
Yeah, you don't play 4 of them, though.
It's not exactly in that league in Modern, because 5 mana in Modern buys you so much more than it does in Standard. And the more that a card is undercosted, the more relevance it has in a format where everything has to be undercosted. And the cheaper a card is, the more likely it is to be able to... Like, for instance, Opt. Maybe Opt is, whether Opt is a tiny little bit too much or a tiny little bit too little, well, part of the trick with Opt is that you also have to value the selection, and you have to value how strong of a card are you going to draw off of it. And in Modern, the cards you draw off of it are so much stronger, and the selection matters a lot for a deck like Storm.
Yeah, I think
so that's it.
I think there's a couple of things that are interesting about this rise of Storm the past couple of weeks. One of them, I don't know. It's kind of been there, right? But I think one of them, I think we mentioned it before, is Baral, Chief of Compliance, which is a card that's been printed in.
That's the game changer.
Yeah.
That was the one that shifted everything.
Yeah, it's tough to interact with Baral Chief of Compliance without using. I guess you could do it for 1 mana if you got pushes and bolts can do it, but typically you're going to have to interact with it with 2 mana. And the problem is if the Storm deck is on the play, then they just go like Baral on turn 2. You have to use your whole turn unbaralling them, right? And then if you don't use your whole turn unbaralling them, they just destroy you because they have Baral in play. Like that's like the big problem, right? And he's a 3 toughness creature, so he can absorb like. You just put him in front of somebody like, yeah, go on, kill him. I dare you, right? It's tough. He's like a reasonably good defender for a card that is only planning to be around for 1 or 2 turns, right? And he's amazing as a time walk, and even more amazing if he doesn't time walk. Actually, then he's like 3 time walks.
And heaven forbid you have another Baral in your hand that you play on turn 3, and then when they spend their entire turn trying to kill that, you remand it.
Yeah, because you can remand it for only 1 mana if you have a Baral in play.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's such a game changer. And then, like, I think that if you've got, like, 4 lands, you don't even have to start with 4 lands because you can use, like, your 1 mana Manamorphose or whatever to dig into your 4th land, or if you don't have it or something like that. And you just, like, 4 lands and a Baral in play on turn 4. They're probably toast, right? Like, the problem is so many of the cards in this deck do very, very similar things. Like, either they draw a card for 1, especially if they have a Baral in play. Either they draw a card for 1 mana, or they net you up additional mana, or both, right? So we've got a lot of cards that are like a Pyretic Ritual or like a Manamorphose. And a Manamorphose is kind of this card that bridges the Serum Visions part of the deck, the Op part of the deck, and the Pyretic Ritual part of the deck. And so basically everything you're drawing that's not land is just a thing that helps you keep going. It either helps you cast your next card that helps you keep going, or it helps you dig forth into your deck for the next thing to do, and then eventually you just have enough critical mass and you just land a grape shot or 3.
I did want to note though that part of the reason, even though this deck is like very homogenous, the selection actually matters a ton because of how high leverage, and I think you hit at this exactly, which was, is it a land or not? And it's so high leverage, it like spots where you're trying to go off and you need more business to keep going. The cost of having to wait a turn when you have 7 red in your pool and like all the, and the storm count is at 8 or whatever. It's extremely important to not run out of gas right now. And I think that's one of the things that Opt does, despite how homogenous this deck is.
So one of the things I think is interesting about this deck is the presence of 3 grape shots. What's up with 3 grape shots? In the past, we've seen as few as 1 grape shot in modern Storm decks, right?
Yeah. Interaction.
You think it's just there to nug an Eidolon or something?
Maybe. I don't know, man. I know that I wouldn't count on grape shot in the new just spamming grape shots. I mean, maybe that's the right way, but man, I don't think I would want to try to fight the Thalia, Meddling Mage, Kite Sail Freebooter, this new strategy, like this Unreal Humans deck that the Grindcast guys, the MTG Grindcast and Collins Mullen, the Open champion from this past weekend. This new deck looks so sick, and it is very informed by the presence of Storm. It's a deck that you can tell in its construction it was aware of who it wanted to be.
So we're jumping from last week's champion archetype to this week's champion archetype, Modern Open to Modern Open. Collins Mullen played a humans deck. This deck is, I mean, I guess we've seen decks like this, but this deck is like dialed up to 10, right? It's
to 11.
It's 11 out of 10.
It's a little bit more.
Like,
it's a little bit more.
This is so I think it's the pedal is on the accelerator, man. Like, it's all the way down on this.
So
deck.
Before speaking to some of the individual creature choices, I think at a high level, there's a super, and I know that this is at a high level, a piece of technology that you've invented a couple times as well. the ancient Ziggurat sort of style and how, like, it actually kind of takes you in this very different direction once you commit. Because, like, one of the problems with ancient Ziggurat compared to lands like Cavern of Souls or Unclaimed Territory is the ancient Ziggurat does not tap for a colorless. So if all you have are Ziggurats, you are not casting spells, right? Like, with non-creature spells.
But the thing that's insane about this is Collins has 4 Aether Vials in his main deck.
And that's it.
And there's not a spell in the sideboard. It's just more humans in the sideboard.
Yep. This deck is literally, it's 51 humans and 20 land, 4 vials.
But so let's go.
The 75.
The land is so exciting to me. I just want to reiterate something that we've said many times over the course of our conversations over many years. The capabilities of the deck are always going to emanate from what the mana base can produce. And this mana base is... It's different. It's special.
This is a thing of a beauty.
It's extreme. It's 4 Ancient Ziggurats. You already mentioned that. It's got 4 Cavern of Souls, probably going to be set to humans. And then there's 4 Unclaimed Territory also. Cavern of Souls version 2.0, 4 of that. And then it gets to the regular lands. Some Horizon Canopies, 1 Plains, some fetch lands.
Well, so I don't think it's just like a random hodgepodge either. I wanted to call out some of those others. But first, out of the 20 land... and 4 vials, so there's 24 mana sources, really, other than, I guess there's 4 Noble Hierarchs also. But the fact that out of 20 land and 4 vials, 4 Ancient Ziggurats, they're Utopias. 4 Cavern of Souls, they're Utopias. 4 Unclaimed Territory, they're Utopias. 4 Aether Vial, it's effectively a Utopia. 16 of the 24 land plus vial mana sources are Utopias. So then the question becomes, well, what about the other 8 land? And the thing I love about this other spread is that instead of getting too fancy, too clever spread out, actually consolidates from the perspective of what do I need to be able to play before my vial ticks up? What do I need out of the gate, right? So if you look, this is a deck with 4 Champion of the Parish and 4 Noble Hierarch. Those are the only 1-drops, other than the 4 vials.
Yeah.
Right. And Champion of the Parish is a very high leverage 1-drop on 1. And so this deck has 20 land, all of which can play Champion of the Parish on 1. All 20. That part, I think, is crucial. Now, there's this question of, do you want all this Windswept Heath action? Because the use of a Plains and the use of a Hallowed Fountain means there are 2 potential misses for Noble Hierarch. But one of the things that I like about avoiding any amount of, one path is you could go all in, right? You could be, I'm just going to have 4 Horizon Canopies and some Temple Gardens or whatever. But by having a Plains and 3 Windswept Heaths, there's actually a lot more opportunity to actually cast a card that stops Blood Moon before Blood Moon could come down even, and you can keep interacting with a variety of different... there's a variety of creatures in this deck you can keep playing. It's not just Thalia's Lieutenant and Champion of the Parish and Thalia Heretic Cathar, all these different Thalias. It's also that when you have Noble Hierarch, it means that Meddling Mage is online if you have a Plains. And in fact, Mantis Rider is even online if you have a Plains.
Oh, because Blood Moon gives you the mountain you need. That's some clever technology.
So I like the split here. I don't know enough about the way the games will end up playing out to know for sure how much the life that you're saving helps you race, by being able to Windswept Heath to Plains instead of just having tons of Horizon Canopies. But I think this looks really sweet, and I think that the mana base very wisely avoided getting too fancy. Like for instance, if you're tempting to play with Mutable, Like you already have Aether Vial, Thalia's Lieutenant, Thalia Guardian, Heretic Athar, Guardian Thraben, Kitesail Freebooter. There's so many things, Mayor of Averbrook. But with only 20 land, you do not want to get stuck. You do not, even though it's it's a human and there's all these human synergies, you're actually missing out on most of the good ones. Because Mutavault doesn't get powered up it doesn't power up your Champion of the Parish. It's actually really bad with Champion of the Parish. And it doesn't power up Thalia's Lieutenant. It can sort of help sometimes if you're ambitious, and you power up the Mutavault first and then you Thalia's Lieutenant. But that doesn't always come together the same way. So this deck has Thalia's Lieutenant, Champion of the Parish, Unclaimed Territory, Cavern of Souls. That's so many different human rewards that don't work with Mutavault. And then finally you have Mayor of Averbrook, which does.
Mayor of Averbrook, I was a little surprised to see that guy was, quote, only a 3 of in this deck, but there were 4 Mantis Riders. Mayor of Averbrook seems like one of the best cards in this deck. It goes well with everybody.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe mana curve considerations. This is a deck that, he's got 12 1s, 12 3s, and everything else is a 2.
So,
actually, it's not even 12, is it? It's actually only 9 3s.
So 4 Mantis Rider, 3 Reflector Mages, 7, and then 2 3-drop Thalias. So
there's 3 Reflector Mage.
Yeah. So, not this weekend, but I think next weekend is Modern Star City Regionals. Do you think this is going to be one of the big archetypes come to
I think it should be. I think this deck is... I don't think this is just a flash in the pan. I think that people are going to have to change their decks, and I don't even think this is necessarily the end point of the evolution of the strategy.
It's
so there's
exciting.
A couple things. So part of it's like, why now, right? Like, we've seen decks like this, but why is this suddenly a tier 1? Well, first of all, Unclaimed Territory giving you 1 more Utopia, that's the tipping point, right? Like, sometimes if you just get enough Undiscovered Paradise, Gemstone Mine, City of Brass types, the rules are totally different about what you can build. But then that's not all. Kitesail Freebooter is an important piece of the puzzle, and part of it is once you have access to all these Utopias, your green-white Hate Bears deck can just play Mantis Rider and Kitesail Freebooter because you're just like
Crusades,
right? Because you're like, why not? It's like a Merfolk deck. Like it's like a Merfolk deck in the amount of tribal support, like the Crusading, but Merfolk's better than Merfolk. And then it's like a green-white Hate Bears deck. It's got 4 Meddling Mages, 4 Kitesail Freebooters, 4 Thalia Guardian of Thrabens, 2 Thalia Heretic Athars, and in some spots, even the 3 Reflector Mages. And that's not even counting how much in the sideboard, everything from Ethersworn Canonist to Anafenza the Foremost. This is it's Hate Bears. It's a Merfolk deck. It's a fast rush aggro deck.
Yeah, I think there's 2 things that this deck really has going for it. One of it is fundamental to the deck, and then one of it is very contextual. Fundamental to the deck is this is playing great hyper synergistic linear cards, putting them out real fast, coming out with a fast offense, and just spriting across colors. That's a powerful here's the thing I'm going to do. I'm in on this. That's a powerful thing to do. But contextually, I think one of the things that this deck gets from the rest of the format as kind of like a really, really powerful, it's not intrinsic to the deck powerful, but it comes from other people, what they're not doing. I don't think I've seen a spread of Modern tournaments where there was so little burn in a long time, but even if you look at the burn decks that are performing, there's like no Grim Lavamancers to be seen. Like, the deck that top 4'd the Classic last week had no Grim Lavamancers deck or sideboard. So, like, Like, imagine the kind of cards that this deck doesn't want to play against. They're just not present in the format right now.
Oh, and I think Grim Lavamancer is going to be on the rise.
Well,
but
it's good against these guys, so...
Oh, yeah. Now, keep in mind, though, sometimes you can get ahead of it. You can just tempo them out with... You make your champion big enough, or you get enough, Crusade-type guys down there. They might not have a chance to fill their graveyard. You could come down too fast. I think Grim Lavamancer is an excellent weapon against a deck like this, but it's not the end of the world. I mean, Reflector Mage is like an answer to some degree. Is it Staticaster out of the sideboard? Obviously works pretty well.
Yep. No. It's certainly got some game, right? And a deck that if you start on Champion of the Parish and they don't immediately have an answer for it, it's just going to be like 3/3 coming at them at least within 2 turns. And also depending on if you land one of your Crusades, it might be 4/4 or bigger as early as turn 3. But that's one threat. But just I think that this deck would rather not be facing Grim Lavamancer. That's all.
Oh, I think Grim Lavamancer is one of the best cards people can add to their decks to get percentage against a deck like this.
What do you think about Storm? Storm has played Grim Lavamancer in the sideboard in the past. Do you think that's going to be a thing they might want to do?
Oh, I think that's an excellent idea. Hadn't even thought about it in that context, but I think that sounds really exciting. That sounds interesting.
Yeah, so I think if this deck gets in a race with Storm, then I think Grim Lavamancer might be a thing they want.
Oh, particularly when they're going to be boarding in stuff like Aethersworn Canonist.
Oh, yeah.
It's not. I mean, it's so great when your sideboard card that trumps their main strategy, incidentally also beats their hate. Their sideboard plan.
It's just like when the opponent is bringing in like a random 2/2 and you're bringing in more sweepers. Like that's your criticism of Harsh Mentor in the past.
Yeah. Another thing that Unclaimed Territory enables is Zathrid Necromancer out of the sideboard. 2 and a black, when Zathrid Necromancer or another human creature you control dies, put a 2/2 black zombie creature token on the battlefield tapped. So Zathrid Necromancer as an anti-Supreme Verdict technology, anti-damnation, this is a deck that's obviously very vulnerable to sweepers. And while Zathrid Necromancer has a blind spot to Anger of the Gods, for the most part, Zathrid Necromancer is a real good piece of resilience. It's not just against sweepers either. Even just against spot removal. Obviously, people are going to want to use their spot removal on Zathrid Necromancer. You're still getting 2/2s, even when they have it, right? But some amount of the time, the card they have is Fatal Push. And then they can't necessarily kill the Necromancer,
Yeah, it's they can kill it sometimes, but sometimes not. But it's still, just getting you that body. You know what I love about this deck is while it's vulnerable to sweepers, you can totally overextend into a sweeper on purpose, have them tap all their mana, and then just launch your Mantis Rider, which has haste, like that.
Oh, plus you're like, okay, surprise and respond. On your end step, I'll vial down my my Champion of the Parish, untap, drop the Mantis Rider, boom, here's 5 out of nowhere.
And then they have to have another, if not, even if they have a 1-for-1 there, you can only get one of your guys, and they kind of have to have another sweeper. They're just going to be dead in probably 1 or 2 turns. Yeah, I think this deck is exciting.
Definitely. There were some other sweet decks, though, from this event. There's no question that was the deck of the tournament. And it wasn't just that he took down first place. It was a dominating performance all weekend. Undefeated in the Swiss. 14-0-1. His only draw, or was it 14-0-1 or 14-1? Whatever it was either a draw or a scoop to a friend. But no losses in matches played, and then no losses in the top 8, and just one of the fastest. It just made quick work of people.
I'm very appreciative. I think it seems pretty awesome.
But there's some of the technology that made this deck good actually appears in a few other of the top performing decks. For instance, Jesse Hefner's Death and Taxes deck that he finished 8th with. It's a mono-white Eldrazi deck. So it's confusing. It's like the black-white Eldrazi Taxes deck. I didn't even know how the Eldrazi got so wrapped into the taxation industry. But both of these decks, 7th place Chase Masters with black-white Eldrazi Taxes, and Jesse Hefner with mono-white Death and Taxes. This is, in many ways, there's some similarities, right? Like there's Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, some Hate Bears. Now it's a different mix of Hate Bears. But
well, I mean, Jesse's deck has only got Eldrazi Displacer, right? He doesn't have too many Eldrazi.
Oh, yeah, but I mean, to me, the Eldrazi Displacer is the thing.
Yeah, I mean, the black-white Eldrazi Taxes deck has got a lot of Eldrazi, you know? I think that I get what you're saying, right? The principles of actually not the 2 decks, but all 3 decks are very similar, right? Even if these guys are not as extreme as the Humans deck, which is, like we said, 11 out of 10, they're 4 Aether Vial decks. They've got relatively limited...
It's the Hate Bears aspect, I think, is more the important part. The Eldrazi are just some folks who are into hate.
Yeah.
This deck, Jesse's deck has Leonin Arbiter as, part of the interaction is the whole Flicker Wisp being, like, combination of stuff like Leonin Arbiter and Ghost Quarter and kind of going that way of disrupting and then take over the game by blinking Blade Splicer or using Restoration Angel or whatever, right? It's just
Jesse has
being Aether Vials plus Hate Bears.
Has a minor combo, which I'm a little surprised isn't a bigger part of his deck, because he's a 4 Ghost Quarter deck, but he's also got 1 Aven Mind Sensor in the sideboard, so that's a part of a combo, and then also combine that with Leonin Arbiter. Like that's
and Path to Exile.
And Path to Exile, right? Like kind of any 2 of those is really, really strong together. Even just 4 Path to Exile, 4 Ghost Quarter, just having 8 of those without the other cards, which are, again, really, really powerful when they're in concert with together. Like, a lot of decks just don't have 8 basic lands. Like, they might not have 4 basic lands. Like, you just get them with Ghost Quarters, you get them with Paths, they're just, like, going to stop searching after, like, maybe the second one. Especially, they identify you as an aggro deck, they might just search for a basic land with their fetch land on turn 2. That's just one more basic down. Like, I think that aspect of his deck's actually surprisingly really, really... It's one of those things you don't see it as the center of the deck, but it gives you a lot of edge.
What do you think about the use of 3 Tectonic Edge? Is there any... First of all, I mean, who knows? Maybe we're supposed to use more, but is there any chance Field of Ruin is supposed to be in here?
Huh. That's a good question. I mean, the activation cost on Tectonic Edge, I think, is more attractive for a format like Modern. I think that these cards, the Mind Sensor, the Arbiter, the Ghost Quarter, the Edge, I think they're largely there for, like, Primeval Titan, Scapeshift type decks, right? Like, this deck rules the board against, like, a mid-range or, like, a mid-range board control combo deck inside of 4 mana, right? If it can keep them inside of 4 mana, which that's, Tectonic Edge's sweet spot, they're just going to dominate them, right? Like, Eldrazi Displacer's one of the most powerful things you can have at inside of 4 mana. They've got, obviously, like, Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, etc., like, which is even pushing that mana out. If you add a mana activation to the Tectonic Edge, I think it gets harder for them. And also, I don't know. I guess if you're going to play this many Ghost Quarters and Path to Exiles, the searching doesn't matter.
Well, see, that's where one of the things I was trying to get at is that if you had a full 4 Aven Mind Sensors, Aven Mind Sensor works real well with Field of Ruin.
Yeah.
You can search they can search the top 4. Like, if you just go, if you're on the play and you play an Aven Mind Sensor on turn 3 and then untap and Field of Ruin them, you don't even have to let them get up to 3, let alone letting them get up to 4. And you still get a land that's untapped. You get a discount. Then you can like play a 1-cost card.
Yeah, that's really strong. You're right. Like if you, especially for on the play. How's Field of Ruin play with Arbiter? I guess it's
less good, but still good.
I guess you control the tempo of it, right? So you can do it when it's useful to you.
Right.
Yeah, so actually, let's talk a little bit about the details on this black-white Eldrazi deck.
Yeah.
So one of the things I think is really cool about this deck is it's kind of adopting some card combinations that were really hinted at in Standard, but never really took off that much in Standard, and it's kind of given them a home here. So what I'm really talking about is like Wasteland Strangler. Wasteland Strangler is this pretty cool card. It's black and 2 for a 3/2. Even though it is black in the upper right-hand corner, it's devoid, so it's colorless. It has the ability, when Wasteland Strangler enters the battlefield, you may put a card an opponent owns from exile into that player's graveyard. If you do, target creature gets -3/-3 until end of turn. So, it starts like, well, here's like this Necrotal-like creature, but it has a weird drawback associated with it. But Chase Masters solves that problem by playing a lot of these exile effects, some of which get better when combined with Wasteland Strangler.
Yeah, I mean, like, Blessed Alliance is like the notable exception here. But other than that, all the removal is exile, right? And Eldrazi Displacer, being able to bounce your Flicker Wisp. I mean, Flicker Wisp in particular, and Tidehollow Scholar are, I guess, Thought Knot Seer too. No, not as much though. Mainly, so Tidehollow Scholar and Flicker Wisp are both temporary exiles, but if you can use Wasteland Strangler, now the temporary part is permanent.
Well, so Tidehollow Scholar, I think, is a great example because you can curve into it, right? So you go turn 2 Tidehollow Scholar. If you go Tidehollow Scholar, take the removal spell, for example, right? So you're going to keep the Tidehollow Scholar in play for a turn, hopefully, and then play the Wasteland Strangler the next turn. And then you can use the card that Tidehollow Scholar exiled to fuel the Wasteland Strangler, and now if the Tidehollow Scholar dies, they don't get the card back. It goes into the graveyard, right?
Right.
I think you hinted at something awesome, which is with Flicker Wisp. Flicker Wisp is this card that it sees a lot of play in a lot of pretty similar decks. So we kind of one of these weird cards that has this huge career and legacy, but never did anything in Standard. It costs 1 white for a 3/1 flying. It's actually pretty good stats, but it has this ability: when Flicker Wisp enters the battlefield, exile another target permanent. Return the card to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. This card has always been pretty cool because it can, if you're playing a white weenie type deck, it can blink away an ensnaring bridge, right? Like something like really, really not just a creature. But the downside is that they get it back at the end of turn. If you combine that with Wasteland Strangler, they don't get it back, right? It just goes to the graveyard.
Oh, yeah. But you also, if you use it on your own creatures, you might be able to reset your Wasteland Strangler.
Oh, that's cool.
Or reset your Tidehollow Scholar,
Yeah.
Particularly, like if you Wasteland Strangler, the thing that the Flicker Wisp, I don't know, man. They all start chaining together.
And then Thought Knot Seer obviously is yet another card that Wasteland Strangler can draw, even though it's in kind of opposite order curve-wise.
Well, and once you start Eldrazi Displacering your Flicker Wisp, now you can actually just blink out your opponent's permanents at will. Right? Like it's not just like normally Eldrazi Displacer is bound by only being able to hit creatures. But if you have Flicker Wisp Eldrazi Displacer going, you could disrupt their whatever artifact, enchantment, planeswalker, you name it.
Yeah, this deck is pretty cool.
The land is the other one that I wanted to mention, though, is just the Flicker Wisp hitting somebody's mana base can be surprisingly disruptive, because you can do things like Aether Vial down the Flicker Wisp on their turn so that they don't have, or not even just their turn, because you can do it anyway, do it on your turn. But like at the beginning of your turn, it won't disrupt their main phase as much. If you vial down the Flicker Wisp on their upkeep, they won't have whatever that land is that you're blinking.
Oh yeah, it's like
phase.
It's like
Pestermite tapping a land of sorts.
Yeah, it's what was that card we used to play in Mental Magic a bunch? You can't play a land.
Solfatara?
Yeah, like a Solfatara. But again, we see this combo of just like 4 path to exile 4 Ghost Quarter with some Mind Sensors in the sideboard. But even if you don't have the Mind Sensors, just playing that many...
Well, and 4 Leonin Arbiters in the sideboard.
Sure. But even if you don't have those search creatures online, just having that many, you got to search for basic land type cards. It just taxes people's resources. They don't have enough basic lands to back it all up. The one card I think is missing in this deck, I mean, I don't know if it's wrong that it's missing, it just seems like a card you might want to consider, is Lingering Souls.
Oh, yeah. It would be hard for me to not play Lingering Souls in a deck like this.
Yeah,
at least the sideboard.
Yeah, the main reason I would want to play Lingering Souls is that this week, for the first time in I don't know how long, multiple top 8s from Infect. Kenyon Collins in the Modern Open, and then Emma Handy in the Classic with Infect decks. I don't remember I think it was Gitaxian Probe the last time I saw Infect in the top.
So one of the things I found interesting about the Tide Hollow Scholar aspect of this deck is the similarities of... So there's Tide Hollow Scholar in sort of a Kite Sail freebooter fashion. And Ben Reagan's top 4 deck, Abzan Coco, he's also got access to Tide Hollow Scholar. I think all this, like, there's a lot of Eidolon Relics, of Rhetorics, a lot of Tide Hollow Scholars, a lot of Avid Mind Sensors, and I think that this sort of style of hate bear interaction is, that it's proving to be the current best quote unquote way of combating not just Storm, but also the like Scape Shift and the various Chord of Calling like Counters Company decks, and just the latest breed of combo deck right now are much, they're it's not exactly as much ad nauseum as it is Storm. It's not as much Dredge as it is Counters Company. And it's not as much, I don't know, pick a 2-card combo. You get the idea. I think that the Hate Bears thing is the real takeaway here, though.
Yeah, where's Death Shadow? Is that guy going to make a comeback?
Well, and that's the thing that the Hate Bears are in contrast to, because previous to the last couple of weeks, the primary style of interaction that was, like we were looking at a lot of people trying to interact with things like Duress or Thoughtseize or Inquisition of Kozilek or whatever, and some amount of counter magic. But here we see, instead of Thoughtseizes and Inquisitions, we're seeing Hate Bears. Some possible going after the hand, but also a lot of Thalia action or Leonin Arbiter. And then instead of counterspells, we're seeing decks like Jeremy Bertorioni, his top 4 blue-green Merfolk deck that actually is another Unclaimed Territory deck. It's another pushing it all the way and giving up your spells in order to play with more of the creature type of your choice, in this case Merfolk, which means no Spell Pierces in the main deck. No any kind of interaction outside of, he does make the minor concession to Spreading Seas, despite how hard it is for him to cast. because can triple. My creatures are unblockable. Plus, it actually disrupts people's Tron or their Valakutes.
I mean, you can reasonably take all the white away from a burn deck, right? Like you could just, they might only have one or two sources the entire game.
You are always thinking about burn. I am.
Good. I love burn. I love
Dude.
it. But I'm just saying that's a thing you can do with this deck. Take away all their white.
Now, there's a couple other. I mean, we've seen Merfolk already in previous weeks, but this version has a couple more. Outside of just one Kopala, Warden of Waves, and the going all the way with 4 Kumana Speakers and 4 Merfolk Branchwalkers. This deck's use of Deep Root Waters out of the sideboard is kind of exciting.
Yeah, Deep Root Waters. It's like the Oketra's Monument of Merfolk, right?
Yeah, and it's funny. I don't know how to evaluate that many 1/1 hexproof creatures. But what I can tell you is that I really appreciate having an enchantment source of them instead of relying on artifacts getting Culligan's commanded or creatures that died all their damnations and lightning bolts.
So one thing that I'd say about Deep Root Waters, which I think is actually extremely exciting as a piece of technology to come into Modern, is that it says that it makes 1/1 blue Merfolk token creatures with hexproof, but it doesn't. That's a big filthy lie. If you look at the creatures in this deck, it's like a ton of Lord of Atlantis, a ton of Master of the Pearl Trident, a ton of Mirror Regery. It's really making 2/2s and 3/3s. That's actually what it's doing. It's a lie that it's making 1/1s. So if you say that it could be exciting to make 1/1s given the concentration of Merfolk that could be triggering the Deep Root Waters, but then when you think about the implication, it's actually making pretty big creatures, not 1/1s. I think it gets way more exciting.
Yeah, I mean, hexproof creatures also they always pick up good buffs, but sometimes the Merfolk deck just needs a way to finish somebody off. And even though it's not burn in the traditional sense, if you're playing against somebody who has 4 removal spells and you just have a couple hexproof dudes, it reminds me something of like what it's like when the Affinity player is getting destroyed by Ancient Grudges.
Yeah.
But they just so happen to have an Etched Champion that's going to go the distance.
So I actually wanted to touch on both of those themes tangentially by talking at Kenyon Collins' Infect deck, which was 5th place at the Open this past weekend.
All right.
So on the subject of destroying the Affinity deck, I don't know how I've never seen this before, but he's got Nature's Claim, which is obviously great in a deck that doesn't care what your life total is. But Hurkyl's Recall? I mean, this has got to... This has got to be like the chip in the dam that lets the floodwaters in, right? Like, how is every blue deck that has any power to it not playing Hurkyl's Recall from now on? Isn't this like the best thing ever? It's the best thing ever against Affinity. They can't win a race against it.
Yeah, but who cares about Affinity?
I mean, Affinity's like a pretty high-performing archetype consistently in Modern, isn't it? It's like very consistently in the top 3.
I'm just saying that it seems weird. Like, Hurkyl's Recall isn't new tech, is it?
It can't be new because it's like way back from before I started playing. But it's
like I've been playing Hurkyl's Recall since early in the Clinton administration.
I mean, you were targeting yourself more than targeting the opponent. But
I don't know, man.
I just say
plan A, plan B.
Like Hurkyl's Recall. It's so powerful, and when you're talking about an Etched Champion, it'll stop him too. But then separately on the subject of hexproof, what do you think about this Invisible Stalker sideboard tech? This 1/1 hexproof in the sideboard.
That's the one I don't know how to evaluate. I mean, it seems interesting. I think it's not exactly the piece of tech that I think is ubiquitous, where you can just do this all the time. But I like it as a surprise move.
I mean, I kind of don't like it, only because Kenyon only has 2 Rancors. I think if he was just like, let's go all the way with Rancors, I'd be like, I'm in for the Stalker. Let's go. But it's like I got a 2 out of 4 in my main deck. Let's just mono 1/1s out of the sideboard. I don't think that's scaring anybody, right? Like, most people are optimized to fight against the 1/1 creatures in Infect. and they're expecting to take a lethal shot from a 1/1. They're just not scared of a 1/1 hexproof that can't one-shot them. That's what I think. Like, most of the cards that make the 1/1s good in the main deck are redundant on an Invisible Stalker. Right? Like Binds of the Vastwood, Distortion Strike. Like, they don't have any extra text.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a more natural pairing with a heavy Rancor build. But were there any other decks in the top 8 that you wanted to take a look at before skipping over to some of the other sweet pieces of technology in the format?
Actually, I wanted to contrast two different decks that Star City named them both Mardu. So one of them was Robert Mania's deck from the Classic, and then the other one was Robert Wright's deck from a different Classic. They're both just named Mardu.
These sound like not in the top 8.
They're both in the top 8 of the Classic.
Okay.
Two different Classics. They're both crazy, and they're both super different, and they're both just named Mardu. So one of the decks, Robert Wright's deck from 2 weekends ago, it's like Young Pyromancer, Bedlam Reveler, and Faithless Looting, and like Lingering Souls. Like, I feel like this could be like a really... It's got like one Blood Moon, one Burst Lightning. It seems like it's got like a lot of interesting cards going on. Like, I wouldn't think to necessarily play this strategy, but I can recognize that these are all good cards. But then separately, Robert Mania's deck is a Nahiri the Harbinger Emrakul deck with like similar cards. Like both of them are tons of removal, but Robert Mania's deck is like Nahiri and Sorin and Crackling Doom, Gurmag Angler. Like I can look at all these cards individually and be like, oh, I can imagine wanting to play this card in Modern. I would not have come up with either of these 75s.
All right. Yeah, I don't really have a lot to add. It's a bunch of red, white, and black removal spells, some powerful cards like Lingering Souls and Culligan's Command, and one deck is playing 4 Nahiris and an Emrakul. The other deck has 4 Bedlam Revelers and a couple Monastery Swiftspears.
Yeah, I didn't notice the 2 Monastery Swiftspears. That's yeah,
an exotic number.
That's puzzling. Of all the creature cards I might play 2 of, that wasn't high on my list. Like, I don't think I've ever registered not 4 Monastery Swiftspears if I registered a Monastery Swiftspear.
See, I don't know. I was not as taken by the dichotomy of these top 8 classic Mardu decks. Seems fine. I just don't have enough familiarity with the nuance of when you're going to overload with all the different red, white, and black removal spells and Lingering Souls. Do you want the Nahiri Emrakul package? Maybe. Do you want Young Pyromancer, Monastery Swiftspear, Bedlam Reveler? Maybe, but I guess yeah. And then, do you want the Old Faithful Dark Confidant sort of approach?
I gotta say, I'm a little excited by the prospect of playing a Young Pyromancer on turn 2, crossing my fingers, hoping that it survives, and then casting a Lingering Souls on turn 3. That's kind of
value.
It kind of does it for me.
Yeah.
All right. So, what sweet tech were you thinking about, Patrick?
Well, so to begin with, what did you think of the sort of 5-color Death Shadow? The use, like the pushing towards, like away from Grixis or anything like that, towards like, for instance, Clay Spicklemeyer's 18th place list features 3 Stubborn Denials in the main deck, 4 Traverse the Ulvenwald. You know, this is it's not even just Grixis with Traverse, you know, because it is Grixis / Traverse, but also with Tarmogoyf. And then it's like, well, what about the white? Well, there's a Ranger of Eos in the sideboard and all these Lingering Souls. This is like actual straight 5-color, which is something we haven't really seen as much of in the last 6 months. You know, like it was popular 6 months ago in various forms. I just thought it was interesting, the kind of shifting away from Grixis towards, and there's still more Grixis than 5-color, but it's been mostly Grixis recently up until this weekend.
I mean, super respect for the card Traverse the Uvenwald and the Death Shadow archetype, obviously. I think that having all these extra colors is actually potentially beneficial to the strategy, right? Like, they just actually want to deal damage to themselves, right? So more fetch land into shock land is always welcome. And I mean, I think it's one of those things. It sounds like a cop out, but like it depends on the metagame. Like if you
it is.
No, the decks line up differently depending on what kind of decks you're playing against. The Traverse the Uvenwald deck is faster offensively, and it has potentially different stuff that you can do in terms of using that as a fast tutor to do something devastating. This deck can get, or is it Staticaster? You can get it like at a high level of regularity from going from turn 2 to turn 3. Landed is it Staticaster against Lingering Souls, against various human type decks. It can go get that. The Grixis deck can't do that, right? That's just a different capability. If you're not playing against Lingering Souls or a bunch of 1/1s or whatnot, like that capability is less interesting. The ability to get a Gorkland Rampager to just line up just like a lethal attack out of nowhere by carefully managing your life total and Death Shadow, that's a capability this deck has.
Running a little low on time, but I did want to point to another. You're right. There's the differences in the capabilities, but I did want to point to a little bit of sweet Ixalan tech in Armando Romero's blue-white control deck that he finished lucky number 11 at the Open with. The first thing I would point your attention to is the use of Settle the Wreckage. Settle the Wreckage in Modern in a Cryptic Command deck, and in fact, and a Supreme Verdict deck. This is a deck that has access to Supreme Verdict and still plays a Settle the Wreckage.
Yeah, Settle the Wreckage is a card that I've really warmed up on, and I was a little unsure of it to begin with, but It's so effective against. It's kind of like Mega Path to Exile, right? Like if Path to Exile is good, Settle the Wreckage could be even better. It's like Path to Exile with. I don't even know if card advantage is the right term because you're paying them back, right, for each creature. But again, it's like this Ghost Quarter Path to Exile overload thing. They're gonna run out of basics in Modern. Separately.
I was going to say, spreading seas is actually an important part of the puzzle, too. Like, you can have your spreading seas go after their basics. Like, whichever... Well, like, in terms of shutting off a single color, right?
Yeah.
Because very often people will only have one basic of this or one basic of that.
But he's also got Field of Ruin. So, you were asking about Field of Ruin versus Ghost Quarter or Tectonic Edge. Armando has got that. He's got all the Ixalans. Settle the Wreckage, Field of Ruin. Is that it? That's more Ixalan than anybody else.
Dude, you know what you can do? You can get... you play like a turn 2 Snapcaster Mage. Or probably better to wait till turn 3. But you play a turn 3 Snapcaster Mage for your Serum Vision or Path to Exile, whatever. Turn 4, another Snapcaster Mage in order to get back a mana leak that you played on turn 2, whatever. But turn 4, or turn 5, I guess, turn 5, just boom. Settle the Wreckage on your own Snapcaster Mages so that you can ramp into that Sphinx's Revelation.
I don't hate that. Surprisingly enough, wait, can you deal damage first and then do it? Is it still during combat? Is that a thing? It's still attacking after it does damage, or no?
Let me guess. You want to put damage on the stack?
No. If I deal damage, are they still attacking after damage is done? No, right?
Yeah, I don't think so, but I don't know.
It's all right, so I have to sacrifice 4 damage. Rather.
So here's what I want to know is who's going to be the first person to figure out how to combine Settle the Wreckage with Lingering Souls?
So walk me through what you're thinking about here.
Well, normally you just use Lingering Souls as a lot of threats and blockers or whatever. And normally you just use Settle the Wreckage as a way to interact with opponents for all the same reasons that we see Armando using it. However, the possibility of using of Lingering Souls and then attacking and settling the wreckage, if you also, for instance, were playing a Nahiri Emrakul deck, well, it's a surprising way to suddenly be able to actually have chances of casting Emrakul. Like we just saw a Nahiri Mardu deck with Emrakul, and I wouldn't hate if there was the possibility of surprise going straight from 9 to 13, or more ideally going from 11 to 15.
Yeah, I mean, I was actually thinking that you were going to talk about something the other way. So this deck's already got Getting into the Trials, right? So Getting into the Trials is real interesting in Modern because of the number of people who are going to, try to one-shot you. He's really good against that. He's like super effective against anyone trying to kill you with one big threat versus, going wide. But Getting into the Trials has this other aspect, which is that if you have him online defensively, like imagine you have like a Wall of Omens, a Getting into the Trials, both in play, and the opponent just has to play more and more stuff because otherwise they're not going to be able to kill you. And they're basically playing into your Supreme Verdict / Settle the Wreckage. I was thinking maybe you could combine that even with Lingering Souls, just force people to put so much material out to get like the big defensive swings.
Oh, that's interesting. I want to try it.
Yeah, every time I look at some of these Modern decks, I'm like, man, I kind of want to be blue-white. Like, I kind of love all these cards. I love Snapcaster Mage. I love Wall of Omens. Like, I super love Spreading Seas. Right? Like, if you look at...
You love playing so few one-drops, one-cost cards?
Yeah, there's, like, Serum Visions. I think I would want to Opt if I played this deck. I think Opt is even if it's...
I don't think you can play Opt in blue-white. I think that Opt is for people who have cheap spells.
I think Opt is great with Snapcaster Mage. Great.
That's true. It is pretty great with Snapcaster.
Like, you don't want... Like, not that you have so many one-casting cost spells that playing Serum Visions is, like, such a big drag on you on turn one, but I think you'd rather not. Like, I think that you'd really rather save the optionality there. But I think, like, Opt Snapcaster Mage is sweet, Wall of Omens. And this deck has 24 land, but, like, with 4 Spreading Seas, Wall of Omens, Serum Visions, it plays like it has, I don't know, like 28 lands or something.
Did you do the math?
No, I didn't. I could do the math. It's 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 5. It's 29 lands, actually, it plays like.
Okay. Good to double check.
But yeah, like, I always get excited about these kind of decks, and then I still just end up having 4 Inspiring Vantage in my 60. I'm planning to play in the Modern Regional Championships, though. I'm pretty excited for that. So
yeah, it's definitely going to be dope. Definitely the Modern event to check out.
So that's in a week and a half now, or it's like 8 days from when this podcast gets.
You know what else is 8 days from when this podcast goes up?
Oh, an event in Phoenix, Arizona, perhaps?
No.
No?
No, the literal Pro Tour, man.
I thought that was in Phoenix.
No, the Pro Tour is in Albuquerque.
Man! Albuquerque, Phoenix, I got confused. Yes, the Pro Tour, the standard Pro Tour, that is also going to be probably twice as exciting as...
In your defense, the Grand Prix in Arizona this upcoming weekend is in Arizona.
Yeah, I got wires crossed. Yes, the Pro Tour will probably be more exciting than the Modern.
No, but it'll just be more in 8 days.
Yeah.
Than the Grand Prix in 3.
You're probably just going to line up your second Pro Tour victory that weekend. That's what I'm guessing.
Sweet.
Just going to line it up.
Well, thank you guys for joining us this week. We are awkward, as always.
Yeah, but isn't everyone a little awkward all the time? Like that. This is just,
no, it's not a complaint. I'm just calling them like I see them. Thank you guys for tuning in and sharing us everywhere. Social media, Facebook, Twitter, literally unsolicited Reddit. updating Michael J. Flores' Wikipedia page, any of that stuff. And in particular, the Patreon.com.
Yeah, so we would love to thank Nathan Rush this week.
Thank you, Nathan.
Yeah, and, I just want to reiterate everything Patrick said. We just so much get a kick out of it that we can have these conversations and share our thoughts about Magic and love spending time with each other, and other people love it just as much.
I love spending time with you guys, and kicking it with Michael J. is a small price to pay. I'm just kidding.
It's a large price, I know, but in exchange, we get to do top of the.
Dude, I've known Michael J. since he was not that old.
I have known Patrick Chapin since before he made his first Pro Tour Top 8. One day before he made his first Pro Tour Top 8.
All right. Join us here next week, and hopefully we will, double break it. One for the modern regionals, and one for the standard Pro Tour. See you guys then.
Bye-bye.
Life didn't work so great. Tried to play dredge, it's a jailer hate. Ghostly prison waiting for my untapped phase. Your core trapped in amber stasis state. Lost a lot of friends, got left behind. Had to find a way not to lose my mind. Trapped in a vault